Hello, Mr. Frank Reynolds.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. Running for Cherokee County Sheriff. I'm Trenton Adams, and welcome to the Cherokee County Republican Party candidate interviews.
Thank you, Trenton.
Thank you for taking time out of your campaign to participate in this interview process. We've extended this invitation to all candidates in the race and sourced questions from the CCRP membership. We found that it has been an asset for voters in making their decision. The video will appear on Cherokee County GOP website and will be shared on social media, and the interview will be shown unedited in its entirety. And for the interview, we will ask you a number of questions but can offer no prompting. There's no right or wrong answers, just your answers. And we ask each candidate the same questions. If this is all right with you, I'll have everyone introduce themselves, and then I'll ask John to begin asking the questions.
That sounds fine. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
I'm John Longshore.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good.
And Rick Davies, chairman of the party, sitting in as a fill-in.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Under which branch of government is the sheriff, and what do you believe the sheriff's role and relationship is with the other two branches of government?
The sheriff falls under the executive branch. The other two branches are in support of that. Being the judicial and legislative. We don't make law. What we do is enforce law. Then you have the judicial branch, who obviously judges those things that they've asked us to enforce. So, it is the job of the sheriff to carry out the law from the community and the state level and the federal level. Within reason, provided that there's not any illegal form of, executive order or anything like that.
What types of gun control laws and legislation do you support?
The Second Amendment is very important to me. As a person growing up here in Cherokee County, I got my first gun. My dad bought me a .22 rifle when I was 10 years old, or maybe 11. And ever since then, I've had a healthy appreciation for, firearms and the Second Amendment. I teach my kids to shoot. And, in terms of, law, I think what we have on the books right now is sufficient. There's permitting. There's obviously if anybody violates the law, it's enforced. Some people can retain those rights or get those rights back if under certain circumstances if they lose them. Personally, I believe in concealed carry, through licensing, and I'm not a fan of open carry, and that's been my professional experience. That when we respond to calls, when you have someone open carrying, that it creates a little bit of tension within the community. So, from my professional and personal experience, I think concealed carry is responsible. But, I think in today's times, people are afraid of what might happen from the federal government. And my personal standpoint is that, I'll defend those rights. I'll be the person at the county line, to stand shoulder to shoulder or in front of anybody that's willing to defend those Second Amendment rights. So I'm very much a proponent of protecting our constitutional rights, more specifically the Second Amendment.
Please explain your position on the issue of citizens filming police officers in public.
It's been a hot topic. I think it's a exercise of free speech, so long as it doesn't interfere with the the investigation that's currently going on. Officer safety is very important, and as long as that person that's filming it doesn't jeopardize the integrity of the case or the security of the officer or the investigation itself, they're welcome to film. Often we film those, and if they want to do it, then they should do it responsibly. That's all I ask, and I think that's all any other police officer asks is, just don't interfere and inject yourself into the situation and become part of the problem and not part of the solution. So I welcome anybody that wants to videotape with a cell phone or a handheld camera.
Why is the marshal's office a distinct entity from the sheriff's department?
The county marshal's office handles code enforcement throughout the county. Sometimes they are required to enforce state law, but not necessarily on a daily basis. They're charged with going out and maintaining public order and quality of life throughout the community. And in the process of doing that, they find themselves in environments that are dangerous. Sometimes they roll upon domestic disputes, sometimes they roll upon criminal activity and so forth. And based on the need for having an entity to go out there and enforce those county ordinances, You know, I personally don't think that we need to have the county marshals brought underneath the sheriff's office. I think they do a fine job. There are no duplication of services. In fact, they save the taxpayers a lot of money, in my opinion, of going out there and doing those things on a regular basis. If there is a need for mutual aid, we have certified peace officers, and they're entitled to the same benefits as other peace officers. They're mandated, very qualified, and I support any legislation to keep them mandated and have their arrest powers and do the work for the citizens of Cherokee County.
The marshal's office is tasked with enforcing noise ordinance violations, which typically occur during those hours that the marshal's office is closed. Would you push to have this incorporated as a mutually applicable law rather than a separate jurisdiction issue?
You know, from my memory, the noise ordinance is somewhere around 11:30. It's been a while since I've had to deal with those, and the sheriff's office usually picks up those calls. Obviously, you know, the marshal's office, you know, could go out there and enforce those, but typically we go out there because people have called from, you know, parties on the weekends and those type things. So it's important for us to go out there and ask them to turn the music down and those type things, or shooting their guns and stuff like that. In the process, sometimes, you know, we happen upon some criminal activity, you know, but, you know, in the long run, I don't think that there's a necessity to, you know, really break those things apart. I mean, a deputy is capable of enforcing county ordinance. However, you know, with the 230, 240,000 people in the community, I think it would be, you know, very difficult to assume all those duties within the realm of the marshal's office. And in that process, I think what you would see is, you know, deputies maintaining, you know, their regular duties and having to enforce all this other stuff, that it would be a detriment to the county.
Paragraph 8 of the Georgia Constitution states that searches, seizures, and warrants, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue except upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place or places to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Please describe the difference between a reasonable search and an unreasonable search.
Well, searches can occur in a few different capacities, either through voluntary consent, probable cause, or with a search warrant. And, you know, it's been my experience, having made many arrests and, you know, I currently still am an active member of law enforcement. You know, I think it's very important that we err on the side of the rights of the citizens. And I think it's important that we maintain those checks and balances. You know, that's why, yeah, I think it's very important that when we go to a magistrate to get a warrant, that those things are, as they are here in Cherokee County, looked over and by a neutral party, and, you know, the warrant is signed or not signed. Out on the street, and you have probable cause that a crime has been committed or is about to be committed, that you base it on your training and your experience. You know, and typically what we do is we get consent from the person, and you know, absent of those things is just to ask. Outside of the realm of consent, probable cause, through articulable reasonable suspicion, or a warrant, then we have to abandon that particular investigation or that portion of the investigation and move on. Again, for the protection of the Constitution and the rights of the citizens.
Are you currently up to date with all post certifications, and what are they?
Well, the Georgia Peace Officer Standard Training Council requires 20 hours of training every year for all mandated peace officers. 2 of those hours are use of deadly force and firearms training. And every year, each officer in the state has to maintain those. They have to do it within the 12-month period from January 1 to December 31st. As of right now, I'm not in compliance, only for the fact that I haven't qualified this year yet. And that usually happens either at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year. And I've just not qualified yet. It's not been my turn to qualify. Otherwise, I've got 40 some odd hours, so I'm in excess of it. Most deputies here in Cherokee County and abroad go beyond that. Either their agency requires an additional 20 hours, or they take it upon themselves to, in their supervision and their training goals and professional goals, to usually about 100+ hours every year.
Are you currently employed by a law enforcement agency?
Currently employed with the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. Obviously, I'm on a part-time basis, which means the sheriff has been gracious enough to allow me an opportunity to work on my campaign and not jeopardize the agency, having to juggle those things. So currently still active or employed, but those are minimal hours at this point.
Have you attended and been certified by the FBI Academy?
I am a graduate of the FBI National Academy, class 244. I graduated in 2011. It's a 10-week course in Quantico, Virginia, and graduated that, and also received training or education courses through the University of Virginia.
When was the last training event that you attended, and please describe it?
The last training event that I attended was an active shooter class here in Cherokee County, hosted by the Cherokee Sheriff's Office, and they are in partnership with I think it's the University of Texas and Department of Homeland Security, to provide a training program where these instructors come in from all parts of the United States and teach a 5-day active shooter class in response to anything that the average deputy might happen upon. The actual course for us was the instructor course, so the active shooter class that I'll be teaching in the future is just a 3-day course for the average deputy or police officer. In that class, I'm happy to say that here in Cherokee County we had representatives from the Canton Police Department, the Woodstock Police Department, school resource officers or school police, the district attorney's office, and the sheriff's office, and some other folks.
As Cherokee County residents, if we asked your current or last supervisor which area of your work ethic needed the most improvement, what will we learn?
Well, I report to the chief deputy. My current rank is captain, obviously, as I indicated before, that I am on a part-time basis. And I also report to the sheriff based on, if he comes to me and says, I need you to do this. I can't think of anything that, at this point, that would need improvement. I think Sheriff Craig has been pleased with everything that I've done, the chief deputy as well. They've put me in a position, asked me to be a member of the senior command staff based on the skill sets that I brought. So at this time, I honestly can't think of anything.
If you could start your career over again, what would you do differently?
That's a good question. I think it's, I teach at the police academy pretty regularly, and I'm happy to find men and women who come into this profession, but quite frankly, I'm surprised that people do come into this profession in this day and age. Based on the current events that we see in the news media, and people lumping police officers in one big pile and tagging them with whatever disparaging remarks or whatever, but the law enforcement is a profession. We've come a long way over the past even 25, 35, 40 years. What you'll find today in law enforcement is that, especially here in Cherokee County, is that most of them are working on higher education. They have a lot of experience. They're good people. The vetting process and the job requirements to become a police officer or a deputy here in Cherokee County is second to none. That's from the municipalities and the sheriff's office. I don't know that, knowing what I know now, that quite frankly I'd want to get into law enforcement today. So, because it's a tough job. It's not appreciated like it used to be. Law enforcement may have a part in that of not reaching out and doing their own press, so to speak. I think you're seeing a shift in that. I think you're seeing more community involvement to let people know what we really do. Citizens academies, the Sheriff's Academy, community outreach programs with Neighborhood Watch and those type of things. Allow the Sheriff's Office or the police department to open up and say, this is what we do, this is who we are, we're just like you, but this is the profession that we've chosen. I'm very fortunate that I've had a great career in law enforcement. I'm very happy and satisfied, but to start over, I would be a tough choice, and I'm sure it's a tough choice for these fine men and women. I'm just happy that somebody was willing to come out here and do it.
support releasing inmates who are awaiting trial based on their risk to the community instead of whether or not they would post bail?
There are opportunities for inmates to be released to based on their charges, non-violent offenses, and so forth. And what that does is allows the population in the jail to be reduced a little bit. There are opportunities, I think, that can be done. That's something that has to be done on a case by case. It depends whether it's somewhat of a, I want to say a victimless crime, but certainly something that both the community and the judges and the sheriff and everybody felt comfortable doing that. But the answer to the question is I would have to look at it. I know there are opportunities for sentenced inmates or somebody that's not going to a state facility but are going to stay in the county during that sentencing period and have to work off time, and then you have an inmate workforce. One of the things we do in Pickens County is we have a great inmate workforce program, and it allows the inmate, the person, to get time served 2 for 1 or whatever it may be, worked out through the judges and so forth under probation, and excuse me, not probation, but through the judges, and what that does is it alleviates some of the burden on the jail of having to house that person. And can save the taxpayers money. We built a animal shelter in several years ago, 2004, 2010 or so forth. And we saved the county basically $300,000 allowing these inmates to help work with that. I don't know what programs where we could do something like that here in Cherokee County, but if it benefits the person, the inmate, and it also benefits the community, I think those things are worth looking into.
What are your thoughts on the federal government passing laws providing for the control of privately owned firearms?
Mr. Chairman, say that one more time.
What are your thoughts on the federal government passing laws providing for the control of privately owned firearms?
Well, I would be opposed to that. I'm not sure what pending legislation or law would require the federal government from doing that. Right now, you have the ability to exchange from person to person, so long as you're not a dealer or you're not doing it for business per se. But you can have person-to-person transactions. Again, my concern with the Second Amendment is the incremental encroachments on your Second Amendment rights, and you can look over the past 10 years and see where that's occurred, with the best of intentions sometimes. And I think the unintended consequences is that we restrict our constitutional rights slowly, and over a period of time, we look back and we question, have our rights been taken away, and when did that happen, and why did it happen, how did it happen, and did we play a part in it? So, I'm for less federal government, in your lives, and I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm opposed to federal government getting in the business of your personal life here in Cherokee County.
What is your plan to rid the county of illicit drug makers and traffickers?
Well, quite frankly, there's no magic bullet. There's no one special thing. So to say that we would rid it, what we need to do is look at it responsibly. And the drug problem, I think, in America is we've tried to arrest ourselves out of this problem. There are countless examples where this has happened, and we see that, whether it be the war on drugs through the Reagan era or those things, we've tried to compartmentalize the process. We investigate the crime, we investigate the person, we put them in jail, they go through the system, whether they're an addict or something, in this case let's use an addict, and then they serve their time, but they're right back to it. So what we're looking at is a recidivist problem. We're looking at an addiction problem. Obviously heroin is a big issue. So, what are we doing to fix the person, and what is the root cause? Is it money? Is it addiction? Is it, a way of life? Is it a culture? you know, I think we need to look at all these things. And again, I don't think there's one specific thing that we can say, or anybody, or any sheriff candidate to come in here and say, well, I'm going to be able to do this. We have to look at it holistically as a community to say, how do we address this issue? How do we, you know, fix the person? How do we, you know, bring in different programs to educate children, whether it be through, you know, the school system or a voluntary program that's taught and parents can go to. So there's so many aspects of it. You know, it would be like nailing Jello to a tree. And I've made enough cases in my career to understand that, you know, you make one case, and there's 10 more out there. And then we go try to make those 10 cases, and 10 more pop up. So we have an addiction issue. You know, we have a cultural issue. And what we have to do is together, everybody, to take ownership of that and handle it responsibly.
What is your plan to address and prevent human trafficking within Cherokee County?
Well, again, prevention is awareness. I don't think that, again, this is another issue just like illegal drugs. If there's human trafficking going on, whether it be day laborers or sex trafficking or these type things, it is here in Cherokee County. And I've seen some examples, and here recently I've seen some examples of where that it's been a very concern for me. You know, I've got small children, and anybody, any walk of life, any you know, social economic group is not impervious to this happening to them. And what we have to do is educate our children, educate our parents of what are the warning signs, what are the things that you need to be aware of. You know, how does social media fall into this? And again, I think these are things that we can do as a sheriff's office or the law enforcement agency to help our citizens identify areas that their children might be susceptible. And typically, it's not somebody coming in the middle of the night and snatching your child. It's somebody that's on the other end of that computer, you know, posing as somebody, or somebody that they meet with you know, bad intentions, and the child is scared to go to their parents because of something that they did or something they said. And so I think education is key. But again, it's not something that we can eradicate. It's something as a community, just like drugs, that we can provide an environment to really teach our children what to look for and to teach our parents what to look for. Okay.
Do you consider it unethical to promise anyone a position in the Cherokee County Sheriff's Department to garner support for your election?
I do. You know, I've said all along, I'm not going to make any promises to anybody, any position. The only person that I thought about or will bring in is the chief deputy. I've got a short list of people that I think would meet that criteria based on their experience, their maturity, their fit with the community. And when the time is right, I'll make that selection. But to promise anybody or allude to a promise to a vendor, to a deputy, to a citizen, I think is the wrong thing to do. I don't want to go into this position owing anybody anything. And I think if anybody's doing that, then I think it's wrong. You won't find anybody that I know that's ever indicated that I've promised them. You know, I think it's important to go into a position like this with a clean conscience that you know you owe nobody anything. I'll make one promise, but I'll do my best. And if I don't, then you fire me and you find the right person to do it. But I will ask that you promise me one thing as a citizen of Cherokee County, that you tell me your concerns and how we can make it better as a community, and how, you know, how we can move forward. So,
Would holding annual or biannual public sheriff town hall meetings be rewarding for the county?
I absolutely think so. I think you know, there are 240,000 people in the county. I don't recall what the census was. I think in 2011 it was, you know, 213,000 or something like that. I think it's important to have community outreach programs, as I expressed earlier, and I think town hall meetings are one way of doing that. Obviously, you don't want to have a town hall meeting with 3 or 4 people. So I think if you have good relationships with the citizens, good partnerships with the businesses, and you foster that environment where both the citizens and the business feel like the sheriff's office and the sheriff is there to support their needs as a community, I think you'll have that turnout. You know, it's one of the things that I've been proud to be a part of where I currently work, and you know, we have a great turnout, and I think the sheriff is in a position that he can foster those relationships to the betterment of our community.
What actions would you take if any federal agency did not notify the County Sheriff's Department of a forced property seizure or conducted operations in the county without prior notification? Does the sheriff have a role in defending individuals in the county from improper federal overreach?
Absolutely. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer, and the federal government should notify the sheriff when those things occur. I think there are several examples throughout the nation. I can't think of any particular here in Cherokee County where it's occurred. If it has, I welcome that information so that I can study it. There are examples, such with the EPA and so forth, some instances where the federal government has stepped in and, without notification, without the backing of local law enforcement. And I think it's the sheriff's responsibility to call them on it and represent his people from a law enforcement standpoint, and to make that a priority should that occur.
Differing from a law enforcement response to an immediate danger to life or property, no-knock search warrants allows for an immediate breach of entry into a home, even though not specifically authorized by OCGA 17-5-27. Do you support the use of no-knock search warrants in Cherokee County, and if so, under what circumstances would you use a no-knock warrant?
As a former member of Cherokee County SWAT team for 8 years, I've participated in no-knock search warrants. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is what is the need to protect the life of the deputy in evidence and so forth. So I think what we need to look at is what are the requirements for a no-knock search warrant. I don't think that we can really say that there's an abuse of that here in Cherokee County, but how do we maintain that and so there's not an abuse in the future? And that's having open dialogue and looking at those things. Currently, if a no-knock search warrant is going to be executed, it needs to be signed off on through the Superior Court or Chief Magistrate with an independent review. And what they do is they go through that with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that is it in the best interest of the community? Is it worth the risk to law enforcement or bystanders? I think to say that we're not going to do those, we limit our scope of ability to serve the citizens. There are times when no-knock search warrants are necessary. In Cherokee County, in the SWAT team, they have a threat matrix to say, all right, does this particular situation provide a reasonable use or need for a no-knock search warrant? I don't think that they're signed or used in an abusive way here. We just have to maintain that is carried out in the future, and that there's no abuse. There are examples throughout the United States where that has been abused, but I would like to see any documentation where that's been abused here in Cherokee County. Because you have a very good magistrate, you have a very good judge, you have a very good district attorney, and you've had a very good sheriff. So that's been the environment. Could that change? Absolutely. But as your next sheriff, I'll ensure that if no-knock warrants, search warrants are needed, that they're in the best interest of the community. Hostage rescue, I think, is very important. We don't want to say that, well, we can't rescue this person because, we have to announce ourselves. So they have to be extreme cases. To just cut that out of the equation, I think, might be irresponsible in some cases. But so to answer your question, I'm in support of no-knock search warrants if they're applied in the right way, and here in Cherokee County, I believe that they are.
Civil forfeiture involves the government taking property that belongs to a citizen upon reasonable suspicion. To regain the property from the government, a citizen must prove the innocence of both themselves and of the property being seized, in opposition to the presumption of innocence. And the seizing party is allowed to directly profit from items seized by civil forfeiture. The states of Minnesota and New Mexico have passed laws that permit asset forfeiture only in cases of a conviction. Do you agree with this? Why or why not?
I don't agree with that particularly. And again, just like the no-knock search warrants, I think here in Cherokee County, we are responsible with our civil asset forfeitures. You have the criminal element and then you have the civil side. And the civil asset forfeitures are there for a reason. There are, and talking with the district attorney and talking with the sheriff and my experience, the reason I think that we need to continue that and not change the law for a conviction is sometimes there's a lot of plea deals and things that we don't see on the front end or the back end to take those assets away from those drug dealers. Are there opportunities where this might be abused in some areas? Yeah, I'm sure there are, but not here in Cherokee County. And again, going back to what I said previously, we've had a great district attorney in Gary Moss and then Shannon Wallace. We've had a great sheriff. We've had, our citizens look at this in our grand juries and so forth. And I don't foresee any issue or see any issue now, or do I see an issue in the future. If that happens, then we need to hold those people and those entities accountable to say that they're taking advantage. And I don't believe that we should be in law enforcement for profit. But I do think that if you're a drug dealer and you're harming the community and you're using assets to facilitate that crime or that criminal enterprise, I think that those things need to be taken away. At the same time, we need to make sure that the citizens aren't being harmed by that, and again, an abuse of that power. So I'm in support of civil asset forfeiture to really penalize the criminal and the criminal enterprise.
A member of Cherokee County's legislative delegation has submitted legislation HB 832, which states, "The court shall stay civil forfeiture proceedings during the pendency of criminal proceedings resulting from a related indictment or accusation until such time as the criminal proceedings result in a plea of guilty, a conviction after trial, or an acquittal after trial, or are otherwise concluded before the trial court." As sheriff, would you support civil asset forfeiture before or after due process and a criminal conviction?
Well, it goes back to what I said before. There is due process. There are checks and balances, and again, you go, the comparison between a criminal case and a civil case. There's preponderance of the evidence in the civil asset forfeiture, and again, there are checks and balances in place to ensure that there's not an abuse of that power, and that your intentions behind taking that property or money or assets is to stop that criminal enterprise. So again, I prefer, my stance is that you don't need a quote conviction in that particular case, but you need to have the assurance that the citizens are not being harmed by that process. And if there's an example of that, I would like to see an example in Cherokee County where that's been abused, and I would say that you probably won't be able to provide a specific example.
Bills have been introduced to allow LEOs to ask for carry permits of anyone carrying a sidearm. While currently not passed in Georgia, if such a law were to pass, would you, as a policy, prohibit your deputies from asking for permits solely on the basis of carrying?
Again, I think that's a small encroachment on your Second Amendment rights. I don't think that just because you're carrying a gun that you should be stopped and asked for your papers. I think if you're in a suspicious activity environment where absent the gun it would be suspicious anyways, and you're investigating the potential for a possible crime, the gun is just a factor in it. It should not be the sole factor. And again, my personal preference is concealed carry from a tactical standpoint. And, quite frankly, I think the average citizen would agree with me that, the guy wearing his, shorts and T-shirt and flip-flops with a gun on his side probably creates an environment that's uncomfortable for everybody else. That's when we get called, typically in law enforcement, to go out there. Now, I'm very much in support of, if he's a lawful gun carrier, to carry his gun. But as an average citizen and as a police officer, I've seen that become problematic. So that's why I encourage. But I don't think that that person that is carrying it open should have to produce their papers solely because they're carrying a firearm. I think that's, again, going back to that slow encroachment. So, to answer your question, I would not, I would hate to see that happen. And as a sheriff, I would encourage those officers to use their discretion and apply it judiciously so that as not to jeopardize anybody's rights.
Do you believe that body cameras would effectively solve the problem they're proposed to solve?
No, I think what we have is an accountability issue in the United States. We've lost that trust somewhere along the way. When I first started law enforcement, we didn't have body cameras for the most part. We had vehicle cameras, but not everybody had them. And when you went to court and you swore your oath, your word was your bond. And somewhere in law enforcement and in the general public, we've lost that trust. We've lost the ability that my word is my word and so forth. And so can that aid in corroborating what the officer's saying? Absolutely. So I'm in support of it because I've had a lot of people make accusations, not a lot, I've had instances where people have come in where they've said an officer's acted inappropriate. And my response to them is, well, let's watch the video. And we bring them in, I play the video, and I have yet to see, where that's, the officer has been in violation. And if it has or when it has, we've held them accountable. And so we have nothing to hide. And, so I'm in support of body cameras, but I also think that, what we need to do is get back to that trust and accountability. Currently, the Cherokee County detention staff were all purchased body cameras. So when they're handling inmates, in not every circumstances, but in most circumstances, they have a camera that they can activate. And they have some out on the road. And, I think, again, it keeps the officers on their toes, and it keeps the citizens on theirs, and, it makes it transparent. And, if you've got nothing to hide. There are some issues that we have to look at. Again, do you want somebody coming into your house on a lawful call where you've invited them in, but you didn't know that they were recording the situation? Because that might be subject to open records in some cases, and I don't, are we ready for certain things? Have some of these areas are still in litigation, and we're looking at them to say what's in the best interest of the community. But I'm fully in support of it. We've got nothing to hide, and if we do act improper, then we'll hold those officers accountable.
Are you currently a member of the Cherokee County Republican Party?
Yes.
We would like our elected Republican leaders to help us grow the party. Please briefly describe any significant efforts you have made in the past to support the Republican Party and/or Republican candidates locally, statewide, or nationally.
Good question. As the sheriff, my party affiliation, I'm a Republican. But as a sheriff, you represent all, parties, Democrats, Independents, Republicans, and so forth. My personal party affiliation is that, I'm a conservative Republican. But does that mean that we need to alienate anybody else? Absolutely not. I think there are some things that we can do to grow the party in our belief system. But there are also some people that believe that the sheriff should be a nonpartisan group, as are, should be judges and some other folks. So, again, on a personal level, yes, I'm a Republican. But as a sheriff, I represent all people, and regardless of their affiliation, whether they're a Democrat or an independent. So.
Have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime excluding traffic offenses?
I'm glad you asked that point because this has been brought up several times, and quite frankly, to answer the question accurately, yes. As a juvenile, I was taken down to the police station for breaking a school bus mirror. So, in this process, I don't know if it's the other candidates or candidate, but it's unfortunate that somebody would attack the actions of a 14-year-old child and try to make this look like some dereliction of duty as an adult. And so I take offense to it. As a child here in Cherokee County, I broke a school bus mirror during the summer. And some of the other folks have tried to blow that out of proportion. So technically, I don't have a criminal record because it was done as a juvenile. But for complete transparency, I'll say yes. I was taken down to the Canton Police Station. My mother had to come get me as a child, and I was held accountable. And I had to pay a fine, and I stood in front of Judge Mills, and my parents didn't try to get me off of based on their influence. But it's very unfortunate that things like this will creep up, and I have no tolerance for it, because if you're willing to do that as a political candidate, what are you going to do to the other citizens for political gain or expediency? Are you going to attack the actions of a child or the actions of an adult who built a 22-year career?
And have you ever been the subject of professional discipline or cited for breach of ethics or unprofessional conduct by any disciplinary committee, court, administrative agency, or other professional group?
Yes. During the course of my official duties, I was involved in a vehicle pursuit several years ago, well over 10 years ago. And quite frankly, we'd gone to a new policy. There was an officer from another jurisdiction in that pursuit by himself. I elected to join that pursuit for his safety. And in the process, some of my deputies joined into that pursuit, and when I should have backed them off. The person was eventually apprehended, and I was given a reprimand for participating in that, and I take full responsibility. I was the supervisor on duty, and the deputies were not injured. The other parties were not injured, and the other officers from the other jurisdiction. Provided I didn't get any other trouble, if you will, during the course of that year, that was moved out of my file. So it may still be there, but I mean, you can't do a job of a police officer over 22 years and not have some form of hiccup or disciplinary action if you're doing your job. If you're going out there and working, some things are going to happen like that. And again, I take full responsibility for that.
So that's all the questions we have. Is there anything else you'd like to say at the end of the interview?
Sure. First, let me thank you for the opportunity to be here. I've grew up in Cherokee County. I've worked here for a number of years. I'm excited to do the job as the sheriff. I feel that I would be a people's sheriff and provide the law in a way and in a manner that the citizens want. And I've prepared myself. I realized what Sheriff Garrison was doing. He was laying the foundation for the next sheriff. And in that, through higher education, training, and command experience, and community involvement, would prepare the next person. And I saw those things in his leadership and other sheriffs throughout the United States in the metro area to say, do I have the education, in this case, a master's degree in public administration? Do I have command experience? In my case, overseeing all field operations within the Pickens Sheriff's Office. Have I maintained the budgets within those divisions? Yes. Have I maintained contact with the community that I grew up in and I worked? Absolutely. So, and I think that's what sets us apart from the other candidates, is we both have, or I have both the training, education, and the command experience, but also the community involvement. And I think the combination of those two things really set us apart. And I'm not here just for 2 terms. I believe in term limits on a congressional level. But on a local level, and especially as a sheriff, what you want is stability for your community. It's important that the citizens are provided that stability and the agencies. And having to go through an election is hard on the agencies. Those fine men and women that have built the sheriff's office over the past 24 years have worked hard for what they have. To put them through that every 4 to 8 years, I think is troublesome. So do I plan on being a 20-year sheriff? No. What I plan on doing is being a sheriff, so as long as you feel that I'm doing the job, I don't want to do it for 24 years, but I'm willing to do it for 12 to 16 years if the citizens want that. I'm excited, to be here. I'm excited to be in the process, and I'm excited to serve my community in any capacity. And so thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And vote for Frank Reynolds May 24th. Thank you.